3, 2, 1. So setting up the YouTube live. Here we are. All right, Madam Chair, we are also being live streamed.
All right, super. Let me go ahead and call this meeting of the Oregon Aviation Board into session. If you could do me a favor, Kathy, and give us a quick roll call of the board members.
Thank you very much, Chair Martha Meeker.
Here.
Vice Chair Catherine Stevens.
Present.
Tom Kruger.
Here.
Sugahara.
Here.
Negi.
Present.
And who did I miss? Oh, and Sarah Lucas.
Present.
Unmute, Sarah.
I did. I said present. Can you hear me?
All right. Now I can.
Okay.
All right. And then Chair Meeker, all of the current board members have are present. And if you want to continue with our board member, Mike Oliver.
All right, well, super. Well, for those out there, Mike Oliver, who, if you didn't know, has been doing a lot of fantastic stuff with some historical flying over at Erickson. His schedule has gotten to the point where he's going to step off the board so he can concentrate on other things. So we will be looking for a new board member. If anyone's interested out there, please go to the Oregon Department of Aviation website. And if you'll click on the state board, I believe you'll find a link there that tells you all about how to apply. So it's a lot of fun here. Always good to have new board members. Okay, so with that, for the board, you've had a chance to look at last December's meeting minutes. I believe that is the only thing we have for the consent agenda. Oh, and before we start the actual, if anybody's out there, if you could mute any beeps or whistles or phones that you have, that would be great for everybody that's online today. So anyway, going back to approving the consent agenda, do we have any board member after reviewing the minutes, do we need to make any corrections or additions? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as is?
So moved.
I have a first motion by Catherine. Do I have a second?
Second that.
I think I have a second by Tom. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, hearing no opposition, then the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Okay, with that, Kathy, let me go ahead and give it to you to see if you've got anyone signed up for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Neil White did ask to speak to the board. And then anybody else after that who would like to address the board, if you would please use the raise hand function or turn on your camera and make wild motions so I can see you. Madam Chair.
Okay, I believe we have Jacob. I saw him signaling out there.
So Mr. White is the first one up.
Okay, thank you, members of the board. I want to address a couple issues. First one being obstruction hazards at state-owned airports, primarily the trees. For example, at Malino, we do have the trees there that are an obstruction, and there's been a problem for years. I understand there's a bid out, but we're coming into a time when that has to be removed by April, and time is getting kind of close. The other issue is also cascade locks, and those are with trees. As everybody knows, cascade locks is a safety valve airport. A quote from AirNav says the obstruction trees are 374 feet from the runway, need a 6.1 slope to clear those trees. And we're only talking about an 1,800-foot runway to begin with. So when you talk about a very short runway, and then you add some trees requiring a 6-to-1 slope, that's obviously unacceptable. And the caveat to that is that those trees are on Oregon Department of Aviation land. The other problem there at Cascade Locks is still that zoning issue. Development, people can't even put hangars on there. And we want to see, Chair Meeker, if these issues that have been going on for years, is it possible to get some kind of resolution? Thank you for your time.
You bet, Neil, and I agree with you. The getting rid of some trees at the end of our runway, we should be going forward on that relatively quick, especially if at Cascade Locks, if it's, as you mentioned, it's all on our land. Tony, can you give us a quick happening of what I saw that we're going to talk about Lino, and I had got that, but what is happening with Cascade? Is that on your radar scope?
Okay, we're not getting an answer from Tony, so I'll take it. Yes, it is on our scope. And I'll be happy to reach out to Neil separately and give him the details on that. But yes, the tree removal at Cascade Locks and at Malino is on our scope. So,
is there any reason for Cascade Locks? I don't know the cost of it, but are we going to have to do an EA, or can we just go out there and cut some trees?
I believe we can just cut the trees.
Can we get that done within
Yes.
the next month?
We'll still have to get a bid on that one. I don't know where we're at in the bid process, but I will follow up with you. But
Okay,
I would think
super.
so.
All right, follow up with Neil. We'll get back with you, Neil. Thanks for bringing that up. Kathy, who's next?
That would be, I think you said it was Jake. And then after that, I have iPad 3 Robin. If you can put your name in, that would be fabulous. Jake, you're up.
Okay, so I got one shot. My name is Jacob Kerr. I'm a licensed private investigator. And I'm based here at 5 Sierra 4, and I live in an airplane down by the river. Okay, that's not all true. Most of it is, but I just wanted to say thank you to the board. Thank you for making possible this. This is just incredible. And talk about a safety valve airport. I love the term. Toledo is it's important, as Jimmy Carter used to say. I remember a time when Life Flight came in here and an ambulance went through that gate because I was here and I opened it. Otherwise, they would have just brought the gurney over there. Can you imagine bringing a gurney across the surface that was here? It existed prior to this beautiful upgrade of brand new asphalt. So when my point is, when ONP is fogged in over there, I'm pointing. No, it's over there. There it is. When that's fogged in, you have a choice. You can go to Corvallis and call a friend to come get you 55 miles away, or you could land here at 5 Sierra 4. And look at that sock. I don't know what it's blowing in Newport, but typically it's just a flip-floppy sock, and nothing's going on in here in terms of weird air vortexes, etc. Also, I was at Toledo Dispatch. I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I just do defense stuff, and I talk to cops a lot. I was talking to Cassie Griffith, who's the new manager at Toledo. She's been there. I've lived here a long time. I am 69 years old in March. But anyway, Cassie was asking me if there was still an airport in Siletz. I said, yeah, there is. It's a turf strip, and it's owned by the Gibson family. But she said, yeah, well, when we train, we need to let search and rescue and everybody else know where Life Flight can come or where they can meet up for fixed wing to get help to people. This is an important airport. I don't know if I'm making my point, but I just have so much gratitude to the board for making possible the upgrades. Look at this. This is just, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a fence around the perimeter. And I'd like to speak to that. On August 8th, 2017, I was set up for a perfect landing as usual in my 182. And I noticed a pit bull standing off on the margins off the runway. I didn't pay it any mind. Well, the dog was a car chasing dog, and it took out my right main brake line when it attacked the landing gear as soon as it hit the pavement, and I totaled the airplane. Now, I'm not saying I expect a fence anytime soon, but I see people walking out here. And just the other day, and I got it on video, the owner of the former dog, who unfortunately was killed in the accident, he has two sons, two babies of that dog, and I saw them right over there on the runway, rolling around in the dirt alongside the runway. So that's a huge safety concern. Again, I don't expect a fence, but wouldn't it be nice? Thank you to the board. That's all I got.
All right, Jacob, thanks for checking in, and we will keep on. The mission here is never done. We always want to improve as aviators. We want the best that we can possibly have. We just got to work some more money out of our friends there in Salem. But we'll keep at it. Thank you very much for giving some positive feedback, though. And you got a beautiful area out there, by the way. All right, Ken.
It is gorgeous.
All right, thank you. Next up is Robin Reed, and on deck is Bruce Bennett.
Yes, thank you, board. Can you hear me here? This is Robin Reed. Do you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And what airport are you with?
Yes, I'm at 7S5 Independence. And I would like to comment, and I'd like to thank ODA for getting this signage up on the fences yesterday. Appreciate that. And one of the issues we had a really rough winter. We have the drainage ditch that parallels the access road to the airport. We had flooding issues this winter, which we usually have every winter. And I would like to, maybe when the board comes down, we can point those problems out and talk about maybe a future project of revising the ditches along the access road at the south end between the access road and Hoffman Road. There's a lot of erosion when the fence was put in. There's a ditch alongside one of the posts that's eroding. And again, we're having flooding issues. And Mr. Dalton commented, which I also wanted to comment, that the south hangars where we have the access road and the taxiways, between those two is gravel and rock. Again, a lot of erosion issues, rocks and gravels on the taxiway causing propeller damage. And one last point, with the new signs that were put in, again, thank you. But around the restaurant, it would be safer to have some signage that says pilots and authorized personnel only beyond this point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robin. And keeping control of Mother Nature's water is going to be an issue every time we go over there. We'll continue to work on it best we can. Hopefully, we'll get some more money in there. Copy all else on the gravel. Need to get the gravel. That's just a hazard. So I do look forward to. I think the board, we're going to get down there this year, hopefully, to see what's happening at Independence, and so we'll continue to work getting some projects going there the best we can. So hang tough. We will address especially the gravel, and I'll let Tony talk probably with that a little bit later, and then we'll continue on the signage. That's been a long-term project. Kathy, who do you have next?
There we go. I've got Bruce Bennett next, and on deck is Rich Harrison.
Hey, Bruce, I haven't seen you for a while. What's up?
Good morning. Thank you for your service on the board and your time this morning. A couple things. The director, search for the director of the ODAV, I'm sure, hot topic. My family's had property out there since 1968. I've been flying there since shortly after that. And I'm not an expert, but we have been out there continuously since 1968. I've personally flown 13,800 hours exclusively off the Aurora Airport. I think it's really critical. The Aurora Aviation and the rest of the businesses on the field have had really good relationships with ODA. over the years. And it's kind of gone downhill of late. The communications are not open, and it's just not been functioning near as well as it could be. So I'm hoping you can really search hard and choose the right individual. The criteria, I don't think a college degree is critical. I think an FAA certificate should be strongly considered, if not mandatory. That's the business we're in. And experience is the most important. You know, I won't pat myself on the back, but I've been working there for years when I was still in high school, and I joined the Army while still in high school. So I don't have a minute of college, but I've had a very successful business and employed hundreds of people over the years, real successfully, good careers, good jobs, entry level. And I'm hoping you can find someone that can turn things around at the state, for every state airport. It's just a real critical position, and I urge your attention to it. And the second item is the House bill that I'm sure you're all very well aware of. Catastrophic. The city of Wilsonville and Aurora wanted to take control, veto power over the Aurora airport. I mean, it sounds and is absurd, but it's also a House bill being proposed by a senator and representative. I plan on meeting with them, and I believe they've just kind of been talked into it or traded into it through some political action. But I can't believe, if they knew the potential consequences and impairing safety that it would have. But anyway, that's something for the Oregon Department. Should be top priority right now for the Oregon Department of Aviation to challenge that House bill. And back to the director. I think that there's some work needs to be done. Well, a lot of work on a lot of projects, but mostly safety. We've had a lot of pedestrian vehicle deviations, and I think that goes to the management of the airport and the communication with the airport and the tower. And I'm not sure locking the gates made a real significant improvement. And there's other things, striping education, that the users at the airport and property owners have recommended. I'm really happy to see those are underway. But that's it, my 2 cents worth. Thank you. And any questions, please let me know.
Now, thanks, Bruce. And for the director, as well as we're hiring Heather Peck's replacement there as head of the planning department. Both those folks will be, shortly out. I'm hoping, April, May timeframe at the latest. So we'll get the tour started, and we'll get them over there to introduce you and everybody else to Aurora and all the other airports out there. So you'll see some new faces coming your way here very shortly.
Great, thank you.
Next up is Rich Harrison.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning. I'm with EAA Chapter 292 and also R. Harrison Hangars, both at Independence Airport. 3 items I was going to comment on. Robin covered the first item of the fence or gate signage. Thank you for getting that done. But there are signs missing for the new gates down by Errol Larson's hangar and the one between EAA and Nuche Aviation. So I'd like to see the no parking signs go up in front of those gates. Also back there in construction, I had understood that we were going to get some paint on the asphalt indicating no parking at the areas in front of the gates in the restaurant parking lot. Still like to see that. Item 2, a thank you to Tony Beach and Kevin Olson for making the trip out to our EAA 292 facility for a tour of our building and discussion about our ground lease renewal. From that, it sounds like we'll be getting a 20-year lease renewal with options to extend out further with some planned expansion that we have on our books. This is much better than the 5 to 15 years we'd have been initially told, and EAA is considered an anchor tenant at 7S5, and we intend to be there for a very long time. The last item, in the December meeting, I heard Martha make a statement about there should be a future ODAV meeting at Independence. EAA Chapter 292 would welcome the opportunity to host a meeting. While there, you can get the opportunity to experience our new full motion flight simulator and tour our shops and all the aircraft projects we have going on. If you'd like to make that happen, please contact me.
I'm always for trying up a full motion simulator. I didn't know you had that there.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I do believe that we're on tap. I'd have to check with Kathy. I know she's been juggling schedules between as we bring the board back into meeting in session versus just virtually. But you are on if you're not soon, if that no later than the beginning of 2024, I believe. But Kathy, where are we on setting the meeting agenda coming up here through the end of the year?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board did adopt a schedule for the 23 year. So Independence is on the list for 24. And if there's any change, or if the board would like to have an additional field trip at some point, that is the board's discretion.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're going to get out there, and we may, if we want to move it up, we could do that. You'll also be having the new director that will probably be out there, coming up at the April-May timeframe as well. So you should see some folks out there on somewhat of a regular basis. So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Kathy.
Madam Chair, that is everybody who I've signed up. I see Ted Millar waving his hand as I instructed. So Ted Millar, you are up, sir.
Good morning. The talk about trees, the spring is coming. Of course, the trees are going to start growing. We've been promised for a long time that the trees were going to get removed at the Aurora Airport. So as long as we're working on the trees, is there any progress on getting those removed?
And Betty, I saw that we're going to do some EA updates. Do you have anything else? And more importantly, do we have a time when we're going to have a chainsaw out there? That's kind of where I think everybody wants to know.
Tony's gonna do an update in his briefing a little bit later in this meeting. Can we do it then?
Ted, are you sticking around for the rest of the meeting?
I can, yes.
Okay, I think Tony's going to give us a full Aurora update. So if we can handle it, then you can peg him with any questions you have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate all the help we can get because it's been promised for a long time. And
you bet.
Getting to be
you bet.
critical.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised and nobody else with camera on and for attention. So I believe we've come to the end of people for public testimony.
All right, super. Look forward now then, I guess, to Betty's update.
Okay, just give me a moment and I'll share my screen. All right, I cannot see it. Can you see something that says?
We do.
Director's update. Okay. All right. Okay, so this morning I'm going to talk to you about the 2023 legislative session that is now 2 weeks into the 5-month session, the status on the recruitment and on our governor's recommended budget. So, so as I said, we're 2 weeks into a 5-month session and we already have 13 bills that are related to aviation that we are tracking. And these are the bills so far. We expect there will be more, but these are the ones that are on deck so far. And I'm going to start with the first one is it's a housekeeping bill for the Dallas Airport, sponsored by Senator Bonham. It's going to be heard in Senate Education. We don't have a date for it yet. Most of the bills have not been scheduled yet. So this basically says if a community college offers a program of instruction in aviation maintenance that takes place in a neighboring state at an airport that is owned and operated pursuant to an agreement between a city in this state and a county in the neighboring state, the coursework by students in the program shall be deemed to have occurred within the state and may be considered for clock hours for full-time equivalency. So basically, there's only one airport in the state that meets this criteria. It's the Dalles. And again, it's a housekeeping bill to allow that instruction to be counted as for full-time equivalency. Is there any questions by the board members on the Dalles bill? Okay, moving on to the next one is Senate Bill 5004, which is our budget bill. It's being heard next week in Joint Ways and Means Transportation. The agency requested a total of $52.2 million for the 2-year budget cycle. The governor's recommended budget is a little over 48 million. It included carryover funding for the Cape Blanco runway project because that funding was going to expire at the end of this June. So this just carries it over if we're not done with construction by June. But it did not include our requests for general funds to replace the runway at Oak Ridge, or for $1.5 million in one-time expenses for, one-time funding for legal fees, one additional staff member for education and outreach, to upgrade our land use compatibility guideline, or to do the software upgrades to the leasing and the aircraft registration. Any questions on 5004?
Betty, yeah.
Yeah.
Chair Meeker?
Go
Quick
ahead.
comment?
Yeah.
I'm really glad to see this, especially in terms of the FTE for education and outreach, because that's going to be absolutely critical in the next biennium, especially with the focus on by the FAA on education and some of the other initiatives that are coming along as well. And I'm also really glad to see that the software upgrades is in there as well. So,
I'm sorry, Kenji, I was not clear. The governor's recommended budget does not.
does not include. I'm sorry. Oh, that's a big bummer. Okay. Yeah.
And nor for the Oak Ridge runway replacement. So those are the two things that we requested that the governor is not recommending.
Okay. So I do have a question then. In terms of the software upgrades, because it was considered a pretty critical piece, is there an alternative in the works? Or what are your thought processes around that?
There is not. There's not another funding source that we can go to get this. For the leasing software, we have about 270 leases over 28 properties. We're looking at a very scaled down one that would cost less than $10,000. We can make it work. It's not ideal, but we can make it work. On the aircraft registration software, I don't know. There isn't another funding source. If we take it out of operating, then we're going to have to cut something else. So we're going to look at, we have 5 months remaining in this budget cycle to see if there's enough money to do at least the initial purchase, and then what is the ongoing maintenance cost, and see if there's something else that we can cut, because there is no other choice. There's nowhere else.
And Kenji,
Yes.
And then Kenji, it's up. Betty is somewhat limited on what she can do when advocating for a budget. However, the board and others, we need to talk with our friendly legislatures. We're not talking about a large chunk, amount of money. And we need to approach those legislators who have an interest in aviation to ensure they know that we have some shortages and some key things we need some money applied to. That's up to us. Now, just because the money's not there right now doesn't mean the money can't fall out later on. So we got some work ahead of us. But if we want those things, we got to go out and get the money for it. There's not room inside a no-DAV budget to cut somewhere else.
Okay. Got it. Understood. Yeah. The reason I mentioned that with the software upgrades, because it's a significant customer service piece. And I see that as an opportunity to really increase our KPM on that. So thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions on 5004? Okay, the next one is House Bill 2139. This is sponsored by Representative Mannix. It will be heard in joint transportation, but it has not been scheduled yet. And it says that ODAV will prepare a report with specific recommendations for expediting the return of commercial air service within the city of Salem, and report back to the interim committees by September of 2024. Are there any questions on this one?
Yeah, Betty, I'm not for sure if I really support this at all. This should be Salem doing Salem's report. So we need it, however we can discuss this. I don't know if it'll be with the Joint Transportation Committee, but this is something you don't have the manpower to do this. If Salem wants it, Salem should be doing their own airport reports and for recommendations. Just a note that we need to have out there about how we're going to address this.
Okay, and you brought up a good point now. So I will remind the board members that the department does not take positions on bills with the exception of the ones that we sponsor. So we can't take a position on it, but the board certainly can. And so if the board wants to take a position on any of the bills I'm talking about today or others that are introduced, the board certainly can do that. Okay, so if there's no more on 2139. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I would just echo what Martha said, and also I'm wondering where this came from. I don't think this was generated at Salem Airport. So why is this request being made? Does anybody know?
I do not, but I can ask the senator's staff or ask the senator for, I'm sorry, but Representative Mannix, what's prompting the request? Because we have 2 study bills so far proposed in this session. And I can also talk to Co-Chair McLean and see if she has talked to Representative Mannix to see, what's behind the bill and what is he hoping to get? So, because
I'm wondering if they would
there
just-
may be service by September of 24, a year and a half from now, Salem may very well have service.
Well, and I would just, looks like John Pascal's commenting. He's curious as well. Huh? Yeah, makes sense. I'm wondering if there's just a misunderstanding, if that maybe there's a perception that the Salem Airport is owned and operated by the state, which it is not. So it would be good to clarify that because Martha's absolutely right. You don't have the bandwidth to be generating a report like that.
Okay, thank you. I will get an IOU with Rep. Mannix.
Steve.
I support your Chair Meeker. I support your request on this, and Catherine as well. Betty, I don't think the department had, for the amount of resources the department has, it's best used in other areas than doing this. This is work, if it really is that Salem would like to do, Salem should do. Using ODAV's limited resources, they should be focused elsewhere.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, so is that if that's the consensus of the board, does the board want to take a position on the bill? Or do you just want me to follow up with Representative Mannix and see what's behind it and then report back to you? What would you
Betty,
like to
let's
do?
fight. Yeah, if you could get with the representative, that would be good. But then versus the board taking a position, we could do that on each one of these bills. But there's also some goodness to, can we get some time with myself and probably Catherine and anybody else who wants to come? We probably need on some of the bills that we feel are actually going to get a hearing. Now, a lot of these, if they're not going to get a hearing and there's no traction, let's not waste our time. But for those who do begin to get traction, we probably need to have some discussion with members who are on the Joint Transportation Committee or whichever committee we think will hear the bill, as well as the representative or senator sponsoring the bill. And while you can't do anything, I certainly can. I can lobby out to my heart's, till the cows come home.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. Anything else on 2139? Okay, so 2269 is requested by the department. It had its first hearing last week in Joint Transportation. And this is the one where we're moving airport licensing and aircraft registration fees out of statute into administrative rule. So again, the hearing was last week. Oregon Pilots Association, Neil, who's on the meeting today, attended the hearing with me, and the Oregon Airport Managers Association submitted a letter of support. And so the next step will be a work session within that same committee. And as of this morning, it had not been scheduled yet, but I expect it will within the next few weeks. So any questions on 2269? Okay, there are 5 uncrewed aerial system related bills, none of which have had hearings scheduled yet. First one, House Bill 2520, is sponsored by Representatives Marsh and Graber, and it prohibits persons from recklessly knowing or intentionally using unmanned aircraft systems to interfere with wildfire suppression, law enforcement, or emergency response efforts. Second bill is House Bill 2688, sponsored by Representatives Owen, Levy, Morgan, Wright, and Senator Finley, and it modifies provisions establishing a civil action for property owners or occupiers if persons or public bodies fly an unmanned aerial aircraft system over property without permission. Senate Bill 809 is sponsored by Senate Judiciary and requires ODAV to study unmanned aerial systems and report back to them by September of 24. Senate Bill 810 modifies penalties for certain offenses related to UASs, such as pointing a laser from a UAS at an aircraft, a mid-air collision between the UAS and an aircraft, or interfering with the takeoff or landing of an aircraft. And then Senate Bill 812 allows local governments to prohibit taking off and landing of UASs in local airports, or excuse me, in local parks. So do you want more details on any of those, or do you want
Betty, same thing as with the Salem report. We need to get with the Senate Judiciary Committee. The idea of ODAV doing a study on unmanned aerial systems, what the hell do they want? More specifics. Let's not get something out there that by accident gets passed on something as vague as Senate Bill 809. So if we could have it from the board chair to the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, if we could get a little bit of information on that one.
Okay. The bill, that's exact wording from the bill. It just says study them.
I copy that. I copy that, follow through, and let's get some more information. And if I need to meet with the Senate Judiciary Committee, just tell me.
Yep. And Chair Meeker,
Yeah.
I don't think any have been scheduled for hearing yet, because I know there's a number of trade groups that are interested in a number of these bills. So there's definitely going to be some feedback from some national organizations on a few of these. So as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Betty, none have been scheduled for hearing yet, and they're not accepting testimony, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kenji. Catherine?
Yeah, and I agree. Let's see if any of these actually move forward. But just reading them on the surface, I'm not sure that the state would have jurisdiction. This looks like really FAA regulation that would supersede any kind of state law.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, anything else on any of the UAS bills?
All right, I think we're good.
Okay, so next one is House Bill 2524. It's sponsored by Representative Nathanson at the request of the Service Employees International Union. It will be heard in joint transportation and then go over to House Revenue if it's heard. It proposes to increase the jet fuel tax from 3 cents to 10 cents, with a 7-cent increase going 3 cents into the ASAP program and 4 cents into a new grant program for environmental remediation and insurance, development and maintenance of the workforce at commercial service airports, and to both commercial service and general aviation airports to invest in training and career development programs to attract new airport workers at all levels. So I expect some of you would have questions. So do board members, do you want to have a discussion? Do you want me to give you more detail? What would you like?
For myself, I'm going to hold back on this. I'm not against, I'm not for. I just want to make sure that right now our friends in the legislature understand this, that this request, and our friends with the airlines understand that this was not generated at the ODAV level. But for myself, I would like to see where this goes before I get myself all excited. Catherine?
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think, Representative Nathanson is in my district. So, and I haven't talked to her about this. I intend to, just to learn a little bit more about how this was generated. But I I'm not confident that some of the uses would actually be considered allowable under FAA regulation. So,
Yeah, copy that. Steve.
I was going to follow up with Catherine on the legal components of that too. I'm sure that they'll get to that. I just to let you know, I do know that airlines and other industry groups that might be interested or affected by this are aware of it. I don't know positions that they will be taking, but we certainly have been in touch and in conversation with them. And yeah, more to come.
All right. Back to you, Betty.
Okay, and I forgot to mention that because this is a tax increase, it would require a 3/5 vote. So 18 and 36 to get it passed.
Kenji.
Oh
yeah, quick question on that. How are we in comparison to the surrounding states? I know we had an analysis in our last board meeting, but off the top of my head, I can't remember what it was. But do you know what that is?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know I've got the numbers and I can follow up with you to compare how we are to the surrounding states. We are considerably lower at present at 10 cents. I believe we will be a little bit lower, but let me get the data and then I'll follow up with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one is House Bill 2668, the Aurora Airport Advisory Council. So this is sponsored by Senator Woods and Representative Naran at the request of the city of Wilsonville. And it would be heard in joint transportation. It has not yet been scheduled. So what this bill proposes to do is create a 9-member Aurora Airport Advisory Council made up of 2 cities, Aurora and Wilsonville, 2 counties, Marion and Clackamas, and 5 state agencies: aviation, agriculture, environmental quality, land conservation and development, and transportation, and specifies that ODAV may not approve any new operations, expansions, or runway lengthening of the Aurora State Airport, and may not implement any master plan or airport layout plan recommendations, projects, or programs without an agreement by the unanimous consent of the council, and that a public body may not make a land use decision that would allow an expansion of the runway or allow new or expanded facilities at the Aurora State Airport unless the expansion is consistent with an intergovernmental agreement entered into under Section 1 of this 2023 Act. It also proposes to limit through the fence aviation, commercial, and industrial uses to 50 acres per pilot site, and also that the presence of a transportation facility as defined by ORS 197-798. Oops, sorry. My screen's acting up. Let me do the backup. Okay, may not justify an exemption under subsection 2CA of this section, and that has to do with land use statutes. So,
copy all,
again,
Betty. We're familiar with the intent on this. I don't know if I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I've already expressed my thought on this already to a couple of legislators, so we'll see where it goes.
Do any other board members have questions on this? Nope. Okay. And does the board want to take a position, or do you want to have further discussion?
No, we'll talk with legislators as time goes on. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, and then House Bill 2936, which is sponsored by Representatives Morgan, Kate, Levy, Smith, Wright, and Senators Findley, Hansel, Thatcher, and Weber, will be heard in House Judiciary. Again, it's not scheduled yet. It's a broad bill dealing with firearms restrictions and regulations, and the section relating to aviation is it proposes to repeal the law that was passed in the 22 session that prohibits or that limits possession of firearms by concealed handgun licensees in the Capitol airport grounds and certain school buildings. So it's part of a much broader bill, but this is the section that is related to aviation. Is there any questions or discussions? Oh, sorry.
Chair Meeker, quick note on that. Do you know if this actually affects employees as well? Because it becomes an employment issue.
I do not know. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
Betty. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chair Meeker, did you want to add anything?
No, this has got a long ways to go before I get interested in it.
Okay. All right, that's it for the legislation that we know so far. If there's not any questions by board members, I'm going to move on to the recruitments. Okay, so as Martha mentioned earlier, we have 2 positions open right now. Heather took a position with another state agency. It was a promotion for her. And so she's been gone 2 weeks. She was by yesterday and I tried to convince her to come back, change her mind and come back, but I don't think I was successful. So the deadline for applying for that one is next Monday. We have 11 applications already, and we're hoping to have that position filled and on board by mid-March. So for the aviation director, that application period closed in the middle of January. We ended up having 23 applicants, 11 were in-state, 7 were out-of-state, 2 international, and 3 were unknown because they were not referred out to us because they didn't meet the qualifications. We shortlisted 6 for the first initial interview, which was held earlier this week. And that review committee was comprised of Chair Meeker, Vice Chair Stevens, Member Nagy, and myself. The next step will be in-person interviews sometime mid or late February, and the governor will make a decision, we hope, in March. And the target date is to start by early April. So if possible, we'll bring the new director to the next board meeting, which will be in early April in, we think it may be in Newport. So any questions from board members about the recruitments? Okay, so moving on, I just wanted to touch a little bit more on our the governor's recommended budget. So the agency proposes requests a budget, then the governor reviews all state agencies, all 80 plus of us, and then the governor presented her budget to the legislature 2 days ago, and that was the first time we saw it since our proposal. So we had requested 52 million. The governor recommended 48.5. Of that 48.5, only about a little over 6 million of that is the actual operating budget. The rest of it is our grant program, our pavement preservation program, capital improvements. This also includes federal funds. So this is not, the fuel tax does not generate 48 million every 2 years. We'd like it to, but it doesn't, nowhere close to that. So the FTE is unchanged. As I mentioned earlier, the governor did not recommend our general fund asks. And it will be heard next week as we'll have our first hearing. So are there any questions about the governor's recommended budget? Okay, then if not, I think we are running way behind schedule. So I'm going to very quickly do a quick planning and programming update. Again, Heather goes into more detail, but I'm just going to touch on a couple of things, and then I'm going to have staff talk to you about the rest of the things that we're doing. So on Aurora Master Plan, we are still waiting on the FAA to approve the forecast, and it's been over 6 months, and we don't have a date of when they're going to approve it. So we can't really move forward with anything else until we get an approved forecast. So on pavement maintenance program, Region 3 is at 95% design, and so we hope to be bidding that next month. Tony's going to talk about the capital improvement projects, and Andrea and Alex are going to talk about core, but I wanted to offer to you that we put out a little magazine. It's an educational piece on the grant program, and over the past 6 years, we have returned over 24 million in fuel tax revenues back out to airports in the forms of grants. And so, you know, we're not as big as splashy as Connect Oregon, but 24 million is a pretty decent amount to be returning back out into investing in our system. we put out a little magazine that we give to our stakeholders and our legislators to show them exactly where the money went, which airports, what projects did we fund, and we will have this available on our website next week, and then we'll have print copies if any of you would like them. We're more than happy to provide that to you. So if there's no questions, then I am going to turn it over to Alex and Andrea for the fun part of the meeting, which is the next grant cycle. So I am
Super. Thanks, Betty. And
okay.
good on you on doing the brochure there, doing a little bit of advertising of the goods y'all do with the ASAP program. So
Okay.
so Andrea and Alex, let's talk money.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Meeker and Aviation Board. Today is our very exciting approval of our 23 core applications. So we are excited to present them to you along with our aviation our co-chairs who are with us as well. So we're going to start off with Alex will be reading you our staff report, and then we'll get into our presentation.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, I think Kathy needs to unmute.
Okay, third time. Can we try it?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. So our staff report is for 2022-2023 core grant projects and funding authorization. I believe all the board members should have this emailed to them. If not, they can do so. So this grant cycle is the 7th cycle since the inception of the Aviation System Action Program, or ASAP. Funding for this cycle is the second to include revenue previously earmarked for the ROAR program, which was closed in 2021. The additional monies allow for continued potential funding of the Priority 3 core grants, which are generally economic development projects that assist primarily rural, non-NIPIAS airports and or non-AIP projects. This was the second cycle in which the ACT grading was done in cohorts in Zoom meetings, pairs of reviewers with 7 to 8 grants to review each, followed by a meeting with all Aviation Review Committee ARC members for discussion and ranking of these grant applications. Due to additional funding to the core program, as well as 100% funding from the FAA for most AIP grants in the past 2 years, all Priority 3 grants have been funded. Many of these primarily rural airports with no other funding options for badly needed projects. The ability to provide funding to the Priority 3 grantees has always been part of the vision of the core program. In a cycle 5 and 6, that vision became reality. The core program continues to have additional funding available this year due to the closure of the ROAR program and transfer of revenue from ROAR to ROAR. A funding authorization to fully fund core cycle 7, including all ARC recommended Priority 3 projects, will assist rural regions as they continue to fight to recover from the economic turbulence of the last few years. In addition, the economic benefit of these projects will extend beyond the projects themselves. In total, 39 grant applications were submitted. One was deemed not eligible upon internal review due to it being a request for Connect Oregon project. Additionally, the ARC does not recommend funding application for 2023 MFR 00037 due to not meeting the requirements for core grant funds. Upon review of the remaining grants submitted, the Aviation Review Committee and staff are pleased to request board approval of 38 grants and a funding authorization of $3,107,182 for the 2022-2023 cycle. So in summary, the ARC recommends awarding all applications in Priority 1 totaling $1,777,470. The ARC recommends awarding all applications in Priority 2 totaling $22,500. The ARC recommends approving all applications in Priority 3 except for 2023 MFR 00037, which would total $1,307,212. And the ARC recommends approving funding all the approved core grants for a total grant cycle funding authorization of $3,107,182. And the 2022-2023 core grant cycle has completed the Aviation Review Committee phase pursuant to ORS 319020 subsection 3A and B. And everybody should have the following documents and sample motions.
Great, thank you,
Thank you.
Alex. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen for our presentation. Can you all see, is it the presentation screen that's showing? Okay, perfect. So firstly here, these are just the main points. Alex did go over these in the staff report he just read. So this is our 7th grant cycle. We have some additional funding because of the ROAR program closing, as well as our fuel tax revenue that has recovered from the pandemic years. And then our Aviation Review Committee completed their cohort reviews in the middle of January, and we had our final ARC meeting on January 18th, where the list of recommendations was compiled for the Aviation Board. And then one final thing to note is that in our August 10th, 2022 Aviation Board meeting, the maximum grant cap was increased from 150,000 to 250,000 for this core cycle only. And we did have 3 applications that requested 250,000. So you'll see those in the presentation ahead. So next, I just want to introduce our Aviation Review Committee co-chairs, Jim Knight and Shelley Humble. And before they start, I just wanted to really quickly let you all know that this is Jim Knight's last year acting as one of our co-chairs. And so we did get him this lovely little plaque. We just really wanted to let him know that we appreciate, he's been part of the Aviation Review Committee since the beginning of the core program and has really contributed to helping this be a successful program. We appreciate you so much, Jim, and that plaque will be in the mail to you.
Wow. Oh man, thank you so much. That was totally unexpected, and it was very generous on your part, and I humbly accept that. It has been just a true joy and pleasure for me to be a part of this from the very beginning. I think that this, should see at the high state level that this is one of the most successful programs that the state has. It's really a very good example of how an independent group of people, designed the whole process for evaluating grants for aviation purposes, review it with the staff, and then final approval through the board. This is an amazing way to go through a process. I think it's incredible that that process included really having to determine, how do we score these grants? How do we make determination? What rules should we develop internally so that we feel that when we walk away from these meetings that this is a very fair process. So I've just been very proud to be a part of this. I'm going to miss it, and I'm looking forward to whatever the next thing in my life that comes along. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve our wonderful state and this great organization. So let's get into these issues just real quick, Andrew, if you want to bring up the next screen. Shelley, before we start, is there anything that you want to add?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, board, for having us to present on another great grant application cycle. I, with Jim, have been here from the very beginning, and I can't give enough kudos to the staff that runs this program. They make us look good, and they do a fabulous job. And anytime we have tweaks that we see when we're reviewing, they take them and they run and they fix any of our questions or concerns. So I'm going to let Jim shine, as this is his last meeting. So just thank you. And I love being part of this process.
Well, it's a good chance for me to screw it all up because I can't get in trouble. So here we go. You've seen this information ahead of this, but of those 39 grants, go back to that last screen real quick. 39 applications, $3.1 million. It's really remarkable that we're able to do this for our airports in the state. All right, next one, Andrew. So within the priority 1 grants that have requested the 250,000, We as the ARC committee recommended approval of all the applications as listed. So Columbia Gorge was a South Apron rehabilitation and new taxi lanes for phase 2 construction that exceeded or have requested $250,000. And then Eugene for taxiway, Charlie and Mike rehabilitation. That's all I see. There we go. The Aviation Review Committee recommends the approval of one application submitted in accordance with OAR 73-124 and so forth and so on as a priority 2, as listed in the attachment at the Hobby Field for EOC communication system improvements. Very good project. Next. And then the Aviation Review Committee recommends approving all applications with one exception in the priority 3. And this also includes one priority 3 grant that requested $250,000 at Columbia Gorge for a new fuel tank and self-service project. Unfortunately, the ARC recommended not approving one grant in the amount of $50,000, as we really did not agree that the application met the goals of the core grant program. On a maybe slightly personal note, I think it was a very good idea, is that the request for funding is a worthwhile project. It just doesn't really fit from our perspective within the aviation. It seems to us, to me particularly, it's a perfect project for consideration with Business Oregon. It's an economic development project and not necessarily focused on aviation. So those were the reasons. You know, it's a lot easier to score grant applications when there's plenty of money to go around for everyone. And that's when we actually, kind of ran into some problems where, as we were reviewing this is an aside, and this is information for you as board members. We really discovered this year, probably more than any other year, that some of the scores really in the past would not have passed muster in order to gain grants because of their applications. So we wrestled with those that really spent time on the ones that had very low scores to try to make a determination, was this just something's really wrong with the grant, or is there something wrong in the application process, or it was a misunderstanding by the agency that was requesting the funds. I think that there is a consensus that we need to provide more assistance and help to the airports that are, particularly the small ones. When you've got airports that have staff levels of 1, 2, maybe 3 people, and then throw in to those responsibilities not only the management of the airport, but applications for grants to help them to continue to operate better, we're going to run into some problems, because we're running into issues where the people who are writing the grants have very little experience sometimes. And they're missing points because of a potential misunderstanding of the questions and the implications of their answers to those questions. So, for instance, if an applicant says, is this going to make an improvement to the transportation system? And the person says, well, it's just a security camera. No, I don't think it's going to do that. Well, that necessitates a score that in the past could have disqualified that person. So because we had money to supply, I think what we ended up focusing on was we've got to find a better way of giving education to the grant applicants, to those people who are writing these grants. And before they're submitted, they should go through a training process. Maybe there's a video that could be provided. But I am confident that people do not understand, particularly first-time applicants, that when they say, no, it doesn't really meet the needs of the state according to the rules, I'm sure they do not understand that is a process that could disqualify them for a grant. So fortunately, because the ARC is made up of airport managers primarily, and people very knowledgeable and frequently very knowledgeable about the specific request that one organization is making. It was great to have them speak up in support of the project, because the projects were valuable and they were worthwhile, it just wasn't presented in a way that would have been able for us to score them in a positive light. So the solution in my mind is that it's as simply as better education in the process of submitting the grants. So I know that staff is going to be looking at this and what are the different ways that this can be accomplished. Our role is not to look for ways to discourage grants or to deny people grant opportunities. But really our role is to help the smaller airports be successful in their grant applications. So Shelley, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I would just add to, as we're going through this process this year, on the priority 3, we did have some projects that did not score well, and it wasn't that they weren't a good airport project. It just, the questions really are designed for the priority 1 and somewhat for the priority 2. So we've asked staff to look at the priority 3, which is economic benefit, to look at maybe adding some additional questions when it's a priority 3, because some of the projects didn't rate well, but it was really, it didn't necessarily, I guess the biggest one is, would it decrease transportation costs? And we can piggyback on the security cameras. Well, it doesn't really, but it's a good project for an airport. It will, if there is security on the field, the businesses that are located on the field have more confidence being on the field, but it also allows for additional businesses to entertain the motion of coming to those fields. So it may not, in the black and white sense, decrease transportation, but in the end it does. It's a good airport project. And I know when we were talking with Andrea and Kathy and Alex, that we're going to look at that and see if there's some additional questions when it comes to the priority 3 level projects. And like Jim said, it was great this year that we had enough money to fund all the worthwhile projects that we have approved.
Are there any questions from the board?
Now, Jim and Shelley, I'd really appreciate that. We'll continue to work the process. It's been an interesting couple of years as the funding has gone through changes at the FAA levels, which then have been reflected in what money is being asked for within the Corps. So it'll be interesting as that additional money from the FAA stops flowing, if we get back to a higher request for FAA match and how this all, what we expect as we go forward. But the idea of helping those little airport managers out there, folks who are managing an airport that may be inside a city staff, that's not an aviator, anything we can do to continue to help them, that's gold right there. Catherine?
Yeah, and I would just add that, we did have a couple of years where the 100% funding was great, but now we have additional grant funding that requires a match. So it's great to have these additional opportunities, but if you don't have a match, I think that's really where this program can make a huge difference in our airports in Oregon being able to take advantage of some of those competitive things.
All right, super. Back over to you, Jim.
I just want to finish with saying thank you so much to the staff for the hard work that they've done. They've always been very responsive. I'm going to miss working with them a lot, and the organization is in such good hands with the people that you have within the organization. This is a great program. You should be very proud of the ARC. It is some very honest struggles in dealing with honest reactions to grant requests that really makes this program very, very worthwhile. People really do care and want to see the best for the Department of Aviation. And Betty, I wish you the very best in your retirement. Thank you for all the service that you've provided the organization and the help towards the ARC. And many blessings on all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jim and Shelley. So just to touch on a couple of things that Jim and Shelley mentioned, Alex and I are planning some training presentations. So this year we'll be planning on doing some additional trainings for our grantees, whether it's filling out their progress reports or reimbursements, additional application training, possibly looking at, maybe doing some videos to put on our website. And we'll definitely send out information through our Gov delivery system. And then in regards to the criteria for grading, that is set in rule. And so Alex and I will be starting to look at that process and maybe look at some additional questions that could be brought into the rule, because rulemaking is kind of a comprehensive process. It's not something that will necessarily be updated before our grant cycle this fall, but it's definitely something that we are going to be working on. So you will hear more about that in the future. And then I just wanted to once more, reiterate that the staff has concurred with the ARC's recommendations of approving all applications in priority 1, the 1 application in priority 2, and then all applications but 1 in priority 3, and not approving the 1 Jackson County $50,000 request, with a total grant cycle funding of $3,107,182. And so now, Chair Meeker, we have some draft motions here for you, and we will let the board take it away.
Okay, first of all, Jim and Shelley, once again, I don't know if the folks out on that's online appreciate the amount of work at the local level as represented by individuals like Jim and Shelley and all our Aviation Review Committee members who are at the regional level and at the local level with the airports, who meet, who go over hundreds of pages of grant applications asking, is this, how does this compare to this? And are these guys, is this an appropriate use of state funds? Is this a good grant that we should put forward? It's hours and hours of work, and then they meet together with the other ARCs in the various regions. They come together with an overall plan. It really gives us a local and regional voice to look at these programs to make sure that the grant dollars are being used the best we can. I can't say enough. Jim, who approved you leaving? What? So we are going to miss you. I can only say that we all applaud you, every one of us, for the tremendous work you've done in helping set up this program. And I agree with you. You guys have made, along with the staff, a program that is unmatched, I think, anywhere around, to make sure that grant dollars are meeting the needs of our citizens out there. So absolutely good on y'all. So
thank you.
All right. So with that, just a reminder, we've got 3 motions we need to make. We need to talk about approving priority 1, which are, that's the emphasis of this program, is providing the match dollars for FAA grants. Then we'll do a motion for priority 2, which is additional dollars for infrastructure, patching an apron, doing some sealing work. And then we get into economic development. And if you have, for those out there online, you've heard them talk about 1 grant wasn't approved. That was for a feasibility study of perhaps building a combined educational building where we could do some truck driver training, some maintenance training, some pilot training. Probably not into the focus of what a core grant is. We do hope that it goes forward at some other level, but I think that I think we all pretty much all find out if we all agree with what the ARC and the staff has said. But with that, let me go ahead and we'll start with priority 1, and then we'll just continue to work through the motions until we get to the all 4 are approved and move forward. So with that, do I have a first motion to approve the application submitted in accordance with OAR 738-124-0035, subparagraph 8AA, which is basically priority 1, as recommended and ranked by the Aviation Review Committee and the staff as presented. Do I have a first motion?
So moved.
First motion by Catherine. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Kenji. Was that true?
Yes.
Okay, by Kenji. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing that, motion approves unanimously. Same thing for going for priority 2. Now we're going to have a first motion to approve applications submitted in accordance with the Oregon Administrative Rule 738-124-0035, subparagraph 8A-B, priority 2, as recommended and ranked by the ARC and then reviewed by the staff as presented here today. Do I have a first motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Sarah. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Who is that? Raise your hand.
That was Steve.
Hi, Steve. Okay, we have a second by Steve. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing that, motion is approved unanimously. Going on to priority 3, economic development. Do I have a first motion to approve applications submitted in accordance with OAR 738-124-0035, this time subparagraph 8AC, priority 3, as recommended ranked by the Aviation Committee and is presented by the staff here today. Do I have a first motion?
So moved.
I think I have a motion by Tom.
No.
It was
Kenji. Kenji. I have a first motion by Kenji. I'm sorry. Do I have a second?
Second.
We had a second by Tom. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion is approved unanimously. And then finally, we need a first motion to approve funding authorization for the 2022-2023 core grants in an amount not to exceed the $3,107,182. Do I have a first motion?
So moved.
I have a first motion by Catherine. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Steve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion passes unanimously. Thanks again to the staff. Thanks again to Jim and Shelley. And Jim, I hope you come back and visit us again. Shelley, so are you going to stay on with us?
Yes, ma'am. I am the new chair for the 2023-24 cycle.
All righty, congratulations. We look to continue to for you to help us out. And Jim, fantastic as always. Hopefully, we could get you in some other capacity here with the board, or there's always, if you're bored, there's always positions open in the staff. All right. So with that, I believe that we are driving into the lunch hour. Is that correct, Betty or Kathy? Let me check with you before.
It's 11:20. Do you want to continue on? We have Kristen's report and then Tony's report and then just the board updates and miscellaneous. Do you want to continue on and get out early, or do you want to take a break for lunch?
I'm all for driving on, but let me check with the board members. Anybody got a break right now? Okay, I think it's foot on the accelerator, Betty. Over to you.
Okay, so Kristen is up next. Kristen, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready. So let me share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
We've got your screen.
Okay, great. Okay, so Betty already talked about the budget today, so I am going to talk about the 2022 annual report. So the purpose, the original purpose of this report by statute was to provide a summary of all of our accomplishments and the projects that were completed by the year for the board. But we've also, we've started to use this as a tool for stakeholders too, to show them a little bit about our agency and the background there. So when we're creating this report, we're kind of thinking of appealing to the board, but also to stakeholders who maybe don't know a lot about our agency. So in this report, it talks about ODAV, it talks about our mission. We give some background on the board and what the board does, and then we go over all of our projects that were completed for the year. Okay, so in the page 3 at the beginning, it's just about us to give everybody background on our agency, and it talks about our mission. And then on page 4 is the director's statement. So as we all know, Betty is retiring in April of this year. So her statement this year is a summary of her time here at ODAV. And so this annual report was provided in your packet. So please take the time to read through it. And we're also going to be putting it on our website. So Anybody can read through that in detail. And then the next pages 5 and 6 is all about the board. So on page 6, you see those are all of our board members. And then we also wanted to include not only our current board members, but those who served in 2022. So we have Vince and Hilda on there as well. And then on page 5 is a summary of everything that the board accomplished for the year. So it was a lot. You can see it better on the actual report right here. Is pretty hard to see because it's such fine print, but just the high level summary of it. The highlights are the board approved the 2022 core and SOAR grants. There was several rulemaking that the board did, including tall structures, ASAP rulemaking, lease terms, civil penalties, and then the aircraft dealer license changes. And then the board also approved our budget and all of our policy option packages, several projects and several federal grants, too many to list on there. And then, of course, the board also served as the Connect Oregon Modal Review Committee. Now, this next section is all about the numbers. So when we were putting this together, we kind of wanted it to be a high-level overview. We're picturing stakeholders just flipping through it. They might not read, every word of it. So we wanted kind of some of the important numbers to really kind of pop out in the report. So on page 7, this is all about the aviation benefits in Oregon. So for this one, we got all of these numbers from the Oregon Aviation Plan. On page 8 is more numbers focused on our agency specifically, such as we have a staff of 16, operate and own 28 state airports. We completed 420 tall tower inspections last year, registered over 3,000 aircraft in our database. Let's see, I've got to move you guys here. Page 9 is just a financial snapshot. So our budget from the last session was 31 million. And then there's a snapshot of how we're spending our budget. So you can see the majority of it, 45% is with ASAP. And then 22% is operations. Now in the middle here, it's hard to see on the screen here, but we wanted to make sure we illustrated the largest financial challenge that we had last year. And so that was still recovering from the revenue loss from the pandemic. So we did a little line chart there where you can see the revenue really was plummeting and it's starting to recover. So that's a good news story right there. And I'm talking about this right here. And then at the bottom of this page over here, a few more numbers. So 45% of our revenue from our last budget was from fuel tax. 350,000 revenue per year is generated just from aircraft registration. And so that funds our FAA grant match. And then last year we operated, our operations budget was about 2.5 million for the year. And so we were able to increase that a little bit more for the upcoming budget. Now this next section, we wanted to show the projects that were completed in the programs in 2022. So over here, we talk about our operations program. You can see here we have a picture of our staff working at Cape Blanco. And then we talk about the aircraft registration program. We talk a little bit about our capital construction program. So there's a picture here of Cape Blanco State Airport where there's a runway rehab going on right now. And then another main project from last year was the Selects Bay State Runway Rehab. So in capital construction, we spent about $5.8 million last year. We talk a little bit about our pavement maintenance program. So we spent about $1.1 million last year, focused on region.
Did we lose Kristen?
She froze
Yeah.
there.
Kristen, you're frozen.
Master plan in EA and the Cottage Grove and Independence fences. And so the total project costs there were about 2.4 million. And then down at the bottom, we have a summary of our ASAP programs. So we have a couple pictures here from the grants. So this is from the Burns fuel tank. And this picture right here is the Tillamook AWAS replacement project. So those were both recent core grants. So the summary of core was there was 37 grants awarded last year and about $3.9 million. And then down here, we talk a little bit about SOAR. So this is a picture of the Toledo apron. And some of the major projects last year in SOAR were the Pacific City Access Road and Apron, Toledo apron and reconstruction, and then the match for the Cape Blanco runway rehab. And so the total project cost for SOAR was about $300,000. And then the next 2 pages in our annual report are all about our key performance measures. So we thought that was a good way to snapshot what the agency has been doing because it shows all of our different programs and how we're doing with our goals. And I won't go into those in detail because we've already talked about those at the last 2 board meetings. And that's the total report. So does anyone have any questions about the report or any suggestions?
No, Chris, I really appreciate you putting the KPMs in there because that one that shows, you know, the amount of runway surfacers or airport services meeting standards, and it sits in the 60 percentile range versus the 90 percentile range. That's a perfect talking bullet when we're engaging with folks about the governor and providing dollars to making sure that we keep our infrastructure as best up into operating condition. Catherine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to give Kristen some kudos. I think that report it's visually engaging, and I think telling our story in an easy to absorb way is really important. And so thank you for your work on that. It looks great.
Oh, thank you.
Very professional product.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? All right. Well, I think now we're on to Tony's update, and I believe we're going to talk a little bit about Tony. If you could start, maybe perhaps just so Ted and the gang don't have to stay on forever. Specifically, the question about some tree obstacle removal at Aurora and kind of where we stand.
Yeah. Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Have you loud and clear?
Okay, great. Yeah. Sorry, I had tried to address the comment earlier, and I think my microphone settings were not correct. So, okay, I am going to pull up my presentation, and I will address that question.
So, Madam Chair, while Tony's doing that, I did want to note for the record that Tom Kruger called. He had a emergency at home and had to leave the meeting. We are still at quorum.
Okay, thanks, Kathy.
Okay, do you see the screen with the airports update?
We do.
Okay, so just to answer that question very quickly, we have been waiting on the FAA to provide responses to the information we've submitted for the EA for obstruction removal, and we just got comments back from the FAA last week. So we are reviewing those comments. We're trying to move that forward, that project forward as quickly as we can. We cannot proceed with easement acquisition, but we are trying to proceed with appraisals. But we can't get that done until the EA is complete. So to answer your question about time frame, when can we get chainsaws out and start removing trees? It really has to be at least after the EA is complete. But if we're going to use federal funds, then it really has to follow their process, which includes easement acquisition and the appraisals, which we do expect will be a little bit contentious and will take some time. We have reached out and have been in discussion for the last several years with private property owners about the possibility for them to remove trees or potentially be reimbursed later. If there's private funds or if the property owners choose to remove trees, they certainly can do that anytime. But if we're going to do it, it has to be outside of nesting season. And again, if we're going to use federal funds, then it's really kind of subject to this process.
Tony, copy all on getting outside of nesting season. There's nothing we can do about that. But can we not move forward and then get the federal funds afterwards and be reimbursed? And I mean, how do we get some money flowing and how do we get a tree down?
Yeah, it really needs to follow the FAA process, and again, we can't take any action until the EA is complete.
So give me a month on when I'm going to see a chainsaw.
I think optimistically, either November through March of 23 and 24, or depending on the easement acquisition process, potentially November through March of 24, 25. If we're relying on federal funding and for the state to do this through the FAA's process.
Can we move forward and get reimbursed, or do we have to wait for the? If we don't wait, do we lose the FAA opportunity?
I think we can get reimbursed again after we get through the EA when the EA is done. But we're already looking at having to front a significant portion of the funds for environmental work, and I think to front all of the easement acquisition costs, especially where there's unwilling property owners, I don't know that we're going to be able to get those trees down until we go through the easement acquisition.
Can we front the money for those few projects that we don't think they'll be contentious and just get things started, or are we waiting to get everything approved all at once?
No, sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
No, we're certainly not just waiting. If there's anywhere that we can get trees down, we absolutely will as soon as we can.
Okay. This has just been something that's been, I don't know, 20 years old, and we still haven't got a tree down?
It's
taken a while.
I agree.
Okay. All right. I'll stop beating you up. Thanks.
Okay. I'm gonna get going in the presentation here, and that was a picture from the Salem Airport yesterday morning. It was just a particularly beautiful sunrise, and have a staffing update. We are filling our 2 temp positions. Don Hankwitz, we're lucky to have him back returning for the summer season. He's our retired operations specialist after 19 or 20 years with us, and very great addition to the team. This is going to be our first season where we're going to be fully staffed with maintenance and operations staff after filling a couple of full-time positions last year. So very much looking forward to that. Looking forward to hitting the ground running and tackling the busy season mowing and all the other maintenance duties that we have in front of us. We are going to be filling a second part-time seasonal position. We're going to be recruiting for that. Taylor, who had 5 years with us these last few years, he won't be returning. So want to congratulate him on he recently married and landed an airport job up in the Northwest, up in Washington, I believe. And anyway, very sorry to not have him coming back this year. An update on vehicle and pedestrian deviations. We have had 1 VPD since our meeting in December. We have not had a runway incursion since our last meeting. And we did have, I met with a couple FAA certification inspectors. They came to the Aurora Airport, they took a look at the airport, and they're in the process of compiling their comments and recommendations to the Department of Aviation for addressing VPDs. So we're looking for that letter, and then we'll be working through those recommendations when they come in. In the meantime, we are continuing to work with airport groups on outreach, education, and improvements to mitigate VPDs from both state and private property. And then staff is working on driver's training for state property and for movement area access. I've already mentioned the public comments and the hearing that we held on our rulemaking for civil penalties and violations for VPDs at the Aurora Airport. The only real update here is that we we received a lot of comments, and we've been looking through those. The rulemaking will be brought to the board in a future meeting, and we're really planning to coincide it with the implementation of the driver's training program when that's established. So, so just kind of working through the comments, and that's really in response to comments from the public and from the FAA. So that's what we're planning here in probably either the April or June board meeting. For obstruction removal, I've already mentioned Aurora. Again, the comments we just received from the FAA last week, the last week of January, and appraisals and easement acquisition will begin after the EA is complete. At Malino, the survey is completed, and we are scheduling appraisals to begin right away because the EA for that project is already done. So we're trying to get going on that portion without delay. And then for the trees that already that are on properties that either we own or we already have easements for, we are trying to move full steam ahead to get those portions down before April of this year. Chiloquin survey has commenced and is ongoing. And then just other project updates. I've mentioned the Aurora surface seal and markings project. We held 2 open house meetings in the fall, and we're approaching 100% design. In fact, we're just waiting on that letter from the FAA on whether we're going to incorporate the surface painted holding position signage as part of their recommendation or not. And then we'll be at 100% design, and we're looking to construct in the spring or early summer of 23 of this year. And the master plan, as Betty mentioned, we are still waiting on FAA approval for the forecast. So we do not have a PAC meeting scheduled. And when we get the approval, then we'll be looking to go ahead and schedule that later this year. And as Kristen mentioned, we have the Cape Blanco runway rehabilitation project that we're planning for this summer. So we're approaching 100% design and preparing to go out to bid to construct this summer. Same for Prospect and the Siletz Bay runway rehabilitation. So we have several projects and upcoming closures this year. The surface seal and markings project at Aurora will require closures that, for the runway, taxiways, and apron. And again, that we expect to occur in the spring or summer of 2023. The Cape Blanco Airport, again, runway closure in the summer of 23. Prospect, the same story, and Siletz Bay. We will be doing outreach months in advance so that we can let all of our airport users know and anticipate the closures, and we'll have more details as we get closer. I don't have the slide in this presentation, but if anyone has not signed up for GovDelivery for outreach and notifications for airports, then please do reach out to me. I'm happy to help anyone get set up. Lastly, the Homeowners Association at the Independence State Airport, they have approached us recently with a project that they are working on this spring or summer for a taxi lane rehabilitation, and they're going to do a grind and overlay of their taxi lanes, and really appreciate them coming out to us with months in advance so that we can coordinate on the closures. That will have some impacts and taxiway closures on the parallel taxiway alpha. I'll have a little bit more information on that here in a second. Just on the surface seal project, here's just an example.
Steve Nagy had a question.
Oh, sorry, Steve.
Thanks, Tony. And maybe this is for Betty as well, or somebody else at ODA. You had mentioned the status of the master plan and the forecast. In the interim, until someone is hired, who is the point of contact for that project?
That's me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Betty.
Okay. At Aurora, so just some of the improvements that that we're making as part of our surface seal and markings project are shown on this image. And really this is to make our airfield at Aurora as consistent with the FAA advisory circulars as possible. So we're including some additional changes that will widen the non-moving area boundary line from 6 inches to 12 inches. It's going to include black borders where appropriate to enhance visibility. And we're also adding enhanced center lines where they approach the holding position markings for the runway for the taxiway connectors. And then again, here's just an image of the surface painted hold position signage, the red boxes with the runway numbers. This is just kind of one last detail that we're just trying to confirm with the FAA on eligibility, but it's also intended to add one layer of protection for the runway, and again, just to make the airfield as consistent with ACs. So a number of improvements. Everything else in this project is pavement maintenance and to just refresh the markings on state property. Okay, and then at Cape Blanco, so we're just working full steam to get ready for that project this summer. Staff have been very busy trying to clear trees and brush out adjacent to the runway, and this is to or in anticipation of a lot of the electrical improvements that we're working on. We're looking at PAPIs on both ends of the runway, runway end identifier lights, and so staff have been very busy prioritizing that over the winter. And then again, I mentioned the Independence HOA project. So here's just a representation of all of their taxi lanes that they're going to be working on this summer. The main impacts are going to be the 3 taxi lanes that butt up to the parallel taxiway Alpha, and the closure that we'll be looking at when they're working within the taxiway object free area. So again, thanks to the HOA for reaching out to us and coordinating that, and very happy to establish those and support them for their project. And then that will be, again, we'll share information through GovDelivery, but then that will also be reflected in NOTAMs when those closures are in effect. Other airport maintenance, again, staff have been very busy tackling a lot of a variety of items at airports, including refreshing this holding position marking at Lebanon State Airport. Really excellent work, and appreciate staff jumping on these items as we're trying to catch up on a lot of deferred maintenance at our airports. And then as Jacob had shared earlier, staff has completed the tie down anchors at the Toledo apron. After that project was wrapped up, we didn't include the tie down anchors, but staff have gone out and completed that portion. So that project is now finished. And then staff have also been very busy on, again, a number of deferred maintenance items. We're looking at a pretty significant project to do some maintenance on the exterior of the tower building. And we're also looking at procuring some airfield marking equipment so we can keep up with all of the additional markings that we're going to have at the Aurora State Airport, in addition to all of our other state airports. We are looking at PAPI replacements, and then lighted X upfitting. Other airports, I think this is kind of industry wide, but the conventional bulbs that we use in our lighted X's are increasingly difficult to track down and procure. So there is a way to upfit our lighted X's for runway closures with LEDs, but you know it's a process and it requires some cost. So working on that, and then again obstruction removal for again the Cape Blanco Airport. For we're also looking at obstruction removal at the Wakanda Beach Airport and and then at Siletz Bay, and in addition to everything else we talked about at Cascade Locks, Milano, etc. And airport signage and update and refresh. This is something that we are taking a pretty holistic look at all of our airports as well. Staff have been looking at signage at Toledo, Crescent Lake, Pacific City, and in addition to Independence and Cottage Grove, following those fence projects. So signage is an important thing that we're working on, and it's just an ongoing process. I think that will take some time for us to catch up on all of our airports, but that is an ongoing item that staff are working very hard on. Steve, do you have another question?
Tony, when you say signage, do you mean the regulatory signage, or do you mean just the public signage?
Yeah, primarily public signage. Just do not enter, authorized personnel only. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then for operations and our leasing specialist, they've been very, very busy working on programmatic things, such as creating the driver's training program, really starting from scratch with a new airport inspection and work order system, and airport layout plan review and updates, which we're working on with the FAA. We're taking a fresh look at our volunteer program, our Aero volunteer program. Staff have been busy inspecting and doing the 5010s for all public use airports in Oregon. They do a third of all public use airports in Oregon every year. So all airports get inspected every 3 years. And they're also taking a look at the approach surface compliance KPMs, and again, the inspection KPM through our revised airport inspection and work order system. Kevin has been very busy basically overhauling our entire leasing program since he started with us in June. And he's been busy catching up on billings and CPI updates will be coming out shortly. He's also been very busy with lease compliance and catching up on certificates of insurance and notices to all of our tenants. So with all that, I really just wanted to give a shout out to staff. That has not been a slow season at all. That is non-existent, and we're ramping up to get ready for the busy season this summer. So I just wanted to appreciate them for everything that they're doing and all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes. Any questions?
No, let me echo the congratulations for all the hard work that you guys are doing. You're the face out there. You're the one touching the grass, the pavement, everything that our pilots see out there. So kudos to that, and also big kudos to getting the drivers program and everything going at Aurora. For those who don't know it, a lot of public outreach, public hearings, bringing together a lot of interesting dogs and cats in that endeavor and kind of moving them forward. So I look forward to when you bring that to the board, but I appreciate all the effort that's gone into that Aurora training program over the last, jeepers, 4 or 5 months, if not longer. So thanks. Let me get on with some questions. See, Steve, let me go start with you.
Thanks, Chair Meeker. Yes, I would echo your words about the training programs. That's always good for pilot and vehicle deviations. Also, seeing the enhancements in markings, that is another great opportunity to prevent deviations and incursions. So highly encourage that work. When markings are faded and uneven and difficult for pilots or anyone else to see or interpret, we're just encouraging that kind of incursions or pilot deviations or vehicle or pedestrians as well. To that effort, though, and I see from your slide you have a smaller walk behind one. If you are pursuing larger equipment to do that and more effectively and efficiently, certainly talk to our teams. Or I'm sure Catherine would volunteer her maintenance teams to talk to you about that. We certainly both have proficiency, our maintenance teams, in operating the larger equipment. So if you're looking for that type, you might get some recommendations as to what works best and is most efficient as well.
Great. Thank you, Steve. And when we were at Eugene in October, I definitely snapped a couple photos of the equipment that Catherine had. So thank you for offering that.
Okay, fantastic. Sarah.
Yes, thanks, Chair Maker. Tony, I just had, I think you know which report I'm going to ask for. I don't mean to not give you acknowledgement for all of the good work you are doing, but I would like to have an update on what's happening at Joseph. We promised an instrument approach procedure last fall. And, you know, I've been reading up on the ACs, trying to find any obscure way that has in all of the lighting, marking, and design ACs say we're ready to go. So if you could give us an update on what you found, I'd appreciate that.
Definitely. And thank you for the reminder. When I had on one of my last slides there, the PAPI replacement, that was my cue to address that, and I missed it. So in our last meeting, we had mentioned how the instrument approach procedures were in the process, and then those did not get published. And there was a little bit of confusion. There was some talk about the markings not being compliant, and that was actually not the issue. Really, the FAA had initiated a flight check, unbeknownst to us, and this is what I've discovered in the last couple of months. The PAPI on the north end that is has been giving us some issues, and this is the project that we have had on the CIP to be replaced. Well, it was not functioning during the flight check, and it is unreliable. It's an ongoing issue we're trying to work through, but that failed the flight check, and so ultimately that was why the instrument approach procedures did not get published. After having the electricians go out and take a closer look, it may not be a power issue. It may just be an issue with the PAPIs themselves. And we've been looking at, can we replace just the PAPIs without having to do all new electrical, all new pads? Can we simply just replace the units? And it's looking like, yes, we possibly can. And so we've been getting cost estimates to get new PAPIs, and our goal is, you know, we're probably not going to meet the April deadline for the new publishing, but our goal is to get the PAPIs in before the end of this biennium, and so that we can get a flight check and then make the next publishing, and then and that would address the issue according to the FAA.
Thanks for that update.
Kenji.
All right, Tony, great to see how busy you've been. So congrats on that, and thank you for all that work. The question that I had for you was whether any of the obstructions have gotten to a height where it could be considered almost an emergency, which could be, you could follow an alternative NEPA process, because it is becoming quite a hazard from what I can hear from folks, and whether you've been able to look into something like that would accelerate the timeline.
Okay. I'm not sure about an alternative NEPA process. You know, any obstruction, anything that's penetrating our airport surfaces, they are a hazard to air navigation. And so absolutely, I agree that anything that's penetrating is a hazard, and I think that any hazard is, it's hard to say that one is less important than another, but there are certainly some obstructions that are so significant that that they're absolutely a hazard. Case in point, at Milano, that PAPI on the south end has been turned off for some time because following the approach path was putting aircraft dangerously close to obstructions.
Yeah.
So we have had the PAPI turned off. I think obstruction removal is going to remain a high priority for us, and that's absolutely something that we're going to focus on, or going to remain focused on for the coming years. And you know, right now, one of the things we have been working on are some of our runway safety projects. So preventing some of our airports from closing, Prospect, Cape Blanco. We're continuing to try to work on funding for Oak Ridge. We're really trying to keep certain airports from having to close down, and then possibly have the property revert back to the prior property owners. But as I mentioned in one of my prior slides, staff have been working on a deep dive into our KPM for approach surface compliance, and that's really, I think, is going to help inform both us and the board, and I'm happy to do kind of a deep dive into this when that report is completed. But I think it's really going to help inform what are the issues that we're facing, and where can we best prioritize our efforts and funding to address these obstructions.
Sounds good. And I also have a document from the FAA that might be helpful on that point as well, which I'll send to you after the meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Tony, fantastic. Appreciate the update, and I agree with you 100% that probably the raised awareness of some obstruction removal will be with us for quite a while. All right, so that brings us to, I guess, board updates. Am I tracking correctly, Betty? All right. Just for everybody out there, once again, we will be replacing Mike Oliver on the board. So if you have an interest, please go check out the website information at the ODAV site. That's all I have. Do we have anything out there in board member land that you want to make us aware of? Kenji, how's life going in UAS world?
All right, here I am. UAS world. Let me think. Beyond visual line of sight rulemaking will probably happen quite shortly. I don't know if I remember if I mentioned that or not, but it's going to be the unified calendar was published earlier, and then but that's wrong. They're going to modify it, and then the rulemaking will come out. So it's going to be one big one that's going to cover a lot of different rule sets, which will be interesting. Beyond that, not much from the AAAC. As I mentioned before, I'm leading a task group. We're coming out with our report for best practices for drone operators. So that'll be coming out. We've had some great input from folks, for example, from AOPA and a lot of large drone companies, as well as the advanced air mobility folks as well. So we have a lot of great people working on it, and we'll be presenting at the next AAAC meeting, which will be in March. And if you're bored and you want to hear about drones, tune in. The FAA will be sending out details on that over social, and we'll be sending out emails as well. So that's it from Drone Land. Fantastic.
Beyond line of sight rulemaking should be an interesting process with, I'm assuming, multiple parties bringing comment forward. So,
oh yes.
Good luck. Okay. Sarah, what's happening out there? By the way, Joseph, nominated by Treasury and Leader, not nominated, but designated by Travel and Leisure as one of the top 20 most beautiful cities in the United States.
Well, I would agree with beautiful, but city is a stretch, I guess.
Small town.
Yes, it's definitely a wonderful place to live, work, and play. We've had a pretty mild winter this year, so the lack of snow removal equipment at Joseph was able to squeak by, I think, again this winter, but that's another thing that will be on the forefront before we get that. So appreciate those updates from Tony on that, as well as the instrument approach, but it's pretty quiet. I've been touching base with airport managers in the region here in Eastern Oregon and seeing their needs, and just the same as everybody, time and money. So otherwise pretty quiet. Thank you.
All righty. And I just happened to notice, I guess I didn't see it, but Ted Millar, you had a question. I'm so sorry I didn't see it all.
Yeah, thanks for, let me just make a couple more comments. Following up on Tony on the tree removal. Aurora is the busiest IFR airport in the ODAV system. And we have the headquarters, of course, there for Lifeline. And they've got numerous operations in bad weather and night approaches. ODAV stated in several previous board meetings that the tree removal at Aurora is its highest priority. And there was funding already available and was allocated to the tree removal at Aurora, and then ODEV decided to go after FAA funding. But to have to wait for 2 more years until 2015 to get those trees removed, it's a huge critical safety issue. Is there any possible way we could get some kind of an emergency funding to go ahead and, like you suggested, Martha, maybe do the tree removal first and then go back after the FAA money later?
I'm not sure. It's Tony. I know he talked a little bit about it, that we got to follow process and pursuing the EA.
There he goes. Okay. If I can jump in, we have looked internally at just funding, and as I mentioned, the amount of funds that the FAA is requiring us to front before reimbursement for the environmental on a lot of our projects is already kind of strapping our funds, and so we'd have to look. I'd have to follow up with Kristen and with Betty on what our funding looks like, because it would be years before we get reimbursed from the FAA, and so that would really tire our funds for several years if we were to front all of that. I would just have to get back to you in a future meeting.
Tony, I think it's worth a question coming up here. You know, how much money would it actually? One, can you get us some time in the future to the board? How much money we're talking about, and how, if we go into parceling this out into smaller projects, what's kind of a timeline if we wanted to reshuffle funds to get some trees down at Aurora? Where could we start? How much money would it take? Let's have the conversation, and then we can kind of let all the board know the specifics of this, so we can kind of know what the game plan is and what is possible and what is not possible. And we all understand that any money taken to put towards Aurora is going to be taken from another airport project within the state. That's we don't have any extra money. That's just the way it's going to be.
Okay, absolutely. We'll get that information to you.
Okay, it'd also be good to have that during the SOAR project. Would we approve that coming up here toward the end of this year? We can have that knowledge as well. All right. All right, so back to board members. Let's see. I think Tom, like you said, had to leave us. Steve, Catherine, any reattacks on anything in particular?
Nothing to share at this time, Chair.
All righty, Catherine.
I'll just tag on here, to what I said during the core grants approval process. So, we, with the CARES, Krista, and ARPA funds that were 100%, that was great. But now the doubling of the entitlement funds and then all of the other rounds of additional funding still comes with a match. Most or all small airports do not have just money trees that they can just come up with matches like that. And so even at my airport, where we're just, doing financially very, very well, we've had to ratchet back on what we're doing because we don't have the grant or the matching funds to just apply for every single competitive grant out there, because if we got them all, we'd be in hot water. So I actually brought this issue up to Shanetta Griffin, our airport's representative in DC, and she's aware of it as well. She's heard this from other small airports. So I think if any other, airport managers out there are having this challenge, if you want to contact me, I think it's worth having this discussion at the federal level. Shanetta recognized that, yeah, something really would have to be done for small airports, but it would have to be done at the legislative level, because this is how the bills came out, is with these matches. So unlike, PDX with just deep pockets, right, Steve? Coming up with these matches, it's really painful to not apply for these grants just because we can't come up with an additional match on top of all of our other normal kinds of projects that were already in the queue.
All right, Kenji, back up to you.
Yeah, not an update, but I did have a question for Steve and Catherine, especially because the airports. How are passenger numbers holding? Are they staying pretty well, or are you seeing even more increases? This is just for my own curiosity, coming from the tourism world as well.
Catherine, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we ended 2022 30% above our 2019 passenger numbers. So we are just busting at the seams, and that has a lot to do with adding now 2 new airlines in 2021, and then it's just really spurred on competition. We just keep seeing new routes being announced, so it's great, but we also need to get going on our terminal expansion. So we're working on a plan for that.
We are hovering right around just around 80% of our 2019 levels. There's a couple things that are headwinds that are factoring that. We still do not have international air service to Asia, and likely won't have that for a little bit until markets there in those countries open back up. We've been talking with our airline partners who have provided that service. They're still very interested. It's just going to take some time until those nations open up. We are doing more better than before 2019 international air service to Europe. We actually have more destinations and more options and more flights right now. Domestically, we're facing headwinds, I think, just like anybody else, as regionals change fleets, as they face change aircraft fleets, I should say, as they face some pilot shortages, and as the mainline carriers just face deliveries of some of their aircraft as well. We're in close contact with our airline partners, and we're certainly looking for 23 to be a better year, and maybe not full recovery for someone like our market until 24, just because of like I said, the issues of training, aircraft delivery, and regional air service, which I think are things that we can talk about at a board level, and how we can, have some benefit toward intrastate regional air service, and including to develop and promote that. But financially, even at that, we're doing fine, or I shouldn't say fine, we're doing okay. We still have banked some of the CARES, CARISA, and other funds that we are able to use. Revenues in some areas have come back because people have changed some of their travel behavior and habits. So certainly in the leisure market, that's come back, and certainly in the cargo, as more people have shopped online, the landed weight in air cargo has gone exceedingly well. So all in all, things have balanced out. Even if we haven't gone back to full passenger volumes, we're certainly doing fine from an operational and pretty well from a financial perspective. But we're looking to 23 to be a better year, and need 24 even more than that. But I think, like Catherine points up, if you talk to any specific commercial service airport, they will each tell you a different story dependent on their market, the airlines that serve them, and the challenges each of those air carriers have in their route system. It's very, very localized right now in the industry.
Interesting. Thank you both.
Okay, back over to the staff. Anything for us, or anything that you guys would like to re-attack? Betty?
The next board meeting. We had talked about desire to have a board meeting on the coast. And so we had settled on Astoria, but Astoria is under some construction right now at the airport, and they're not able to accommodate us. So we were thinking that we would go to Newport instead, if that's okay with the board.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been to the coast, so it'll be good to go see Lance and company out there.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, has Lance taken over as the OWAMA chair? He's the guy in charge now? All right, fantastic.
He's not president. Okay, then that's where we'll plan on meeting for the April meeting. And if everything works out well, we will be bringing the new director with us to introduce him or her to you.
Okay, then. Well, great. Guys, it's been super. The core program keeps rocking on. Fantastic. Like I said, kudos to the staff on that. Andrea, Alex, keep her going. And then for everybody else, I guess we will see you. Are we having a virtual session to go over some of the KPM board education items next month? Or are we starting that a little bit later?
If you
Let's
don't
move
mind,
it
I'd
later
like,
in the year.
I'd like to start a little later. We're a little short-staffed right now to be
Okay.
able to, so a little
Okay.
later in the.
And probably not bad. That way we can have the new director and the new airport planner in there as well. I get it. Bring everybody on board. So probably a good plan. All right, folks. Well, that's all I have. So with that, fly safe, and we will see you at the next board meeting. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.